Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Cheats Movement podcast. I am your host, Cheats, and I've got another just exciting conversation, exciting interview to bring to you. I welcome to the program for the first time ever, Adam Aziz, aka Broken Cool. Adam, welcome to the Cheats Movement podcast.
What's up, man? Happy to connect. Appreciate the time, and this is pretty special, man. This is probably a second on-camera interview I've done in over 25 years. So
it was amazing. You're exactly. I was looking. I mentioned this before we started the interview, but I was looking for like photos or LinkedIn or references because your byline, Broken Cool or Adam Aziz's byline, is everywhere when it comes to culture, sports, hip hop in particular. But your personal information is not everywhere. How is this happening?
Well, let's keep it that way. No, I mean, man, it's like, I've been doing this for a really long time, and since I was 16 years old, right? And I'm 41 now. So I was fortunate in the beginning. I launched one of the first online music publications back in 1996.
Right.
And I was fortunate to do a lot of really cool stuff, go to a lot of really cool things, meet a lot of cool people, be out in front when I was like a teenager to my early 20s. And then it kind of just became about doing good work, right? And I talk about it, on social media and stuff like that. But I never kind of jumped out in front of it. Well, here we are.
and look, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. So look, some of our audience might not necessarily might not follow that accent as much as I picked it up already, or that. So that is home base is Toronto, Canadian, so if you hear something in the audience that sounds that not quite as southern as we're used to, it's because Adam is doing his thing in the north, if you call it.
T-dot. Shouts to Cardi.
And for those that aren't familiar with your bylines in particular or Broken Cool, I've come across them quite a bit. And then when I did a deep dive, like you said, for years on years, especially in the hip hop space and most recently this intersection of hip hop and sports. And I just want to be, I look for people that are doing great work in culture and hip hop and sports. Like I said, you're all over the place. The thing that really stood out to me recently was an interview that you did with Todd Snyder. Right. And it was the intersection of hip hop and boxing. He's released a book about the intersection of hip hop and boxing. It just seems like the perfect match, especially as you go through now in your career and sports and hip hop as well. Tell me a little bit about how that interview came about, but then actually I want you to kind of talk about how it relates to your career, which is a giant intersection of hip hop, sports, and culture.
Yeah, so I mean, I was approached about the book that was coming out, Beatboxing. I mean, it's a great book. Everyone should check it out. But what I find kind of fascinating about it was, when you think back in history, there are a lot of intersecting points between boxing and hip hop, and obviously we know some that come to mind. The big one being Tupac and Mike Tyson, and just on that specifically, what was really interesting was reading the book and then thinking about it a bit more. It was kind of wild that Tyson and Pac lived each other's lives at different times, right? And it was Mike Tyson that was trying to get Pac to slow down, and that was really concerned towards the end there, which is kind of ironic, right? Because Mike was in the fast life, kind of prior to that. So that was one. And then I think the thing that drew me to it as well was just, I used to be a big boxing fan, right? Mm-hmm. And much like it kind of draw a parallel to wrestling a little bit for me, right? Like I used to be a big, wrestling fan when we had these like iconic, superstars, wrestlers, or, in boxing, fighters. And then boxing's gone through this like kind of lull, at least casual fan lull period where, a lot of those big name fighters aren't there anymore, right? Or they're there, but they're not kind of in the ring, right?
Sure.
And it's interesting because it's hip hop that's actually, and Todd kind of echoed this, is like it's kind of hip hop that's keeping boxing alive a little bit. Like you have Griselda, frequently referencing fighters, in their lyrics, current and past. And it was really hip hop that was kind of propping boxing up. And hip hop had a big part of growing boxing's popularity, right? So that's what kind of drew me to it. And then to answer the second part of your question, it's just been an honor for me just to kind of be not trying to be extra about it, but it's been an honor for me to be involved in hip hop culture as long as I have been, right? And that's why I'm still in it, right? Obviously, it's great to get opportunities and it's nice to get paid for what you're doing, but I love hip hop, right? Like I love hip hop. I love hip hop culture. I have since I was like a kid, right? Like 8 years old, right? DJ Jazzy Jeff, Fresh Prince, NWA. I remember getting like smacked around because I played straight out of Compton in my backyard one day. So that's what kind of kept me around hip hop culture. And then I'm a sports fan too, so a lot of the recent work I've done has kind of tried to draw the correlation between hip hop culture and sports. I even did an article on the NHL. I'm working on another one right now.
The end racism NHL movement. Yeah.
And the wild thing about that was like, you talk to the younger players and they're like, we have hip hop in the dressing room now and everything. And there's this like infiltration of hip hop culture in hockey culture, which hockey culture, that's too deep to go into now, but there's a lot of issues with hockey culture right now. And, but it's interesting to see when you talk to the younger players, especially younger Black players, they are bringing, hip hop into the fold, and they feel like it's actually helping make, in some cases, for better environments, in those dressing rooms. There's a long way to go, especially after talking and getting deep into that article. We're not there yet, but I think, and even talking to some executives at the league, they know that hip hop culture is actually their way to grow the game. I just don't know if they know how to do it.
But that's a good point. And let's double down on that intersection, because you're living there right now. And I feel like it's such a unique place we're in. And it's been almost, so I think, the roller coaster that has just been the last 12 to 24 months.
Yep.
Global pandemic, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and then you see in particular the NBA and the WNBA really outspoken about this intersection. But what I found interesting about the intersection of sports, culture, hip hop, protests, it actually did get people to look backwards. I heard a lot more about Muhammad Ali and John Carlos and Tommy Smith and all of these kind of pioneers that got us to where we are now. And it's almost like the word I heard quite a bit was like revival. There's like this revival of this intersection of sports and culture. When you look at it now, especially over this roller coaster that has been probably the last 18, 20 plus months, where it seems as if players want to use their voices, and it seems like, for lack of a better term, executives or administrators are trying to find this balance. Like, we want to be on board, but not that much. What have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, the best example is I talked to, and I know I'm jumping back to the NHL for a second, but I think
go ahead. No, this is great.
A good example is, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about Evander Kane because he has some real issues he needs to sort out that are separate of his work in improving diversity and inclusion. But I spoke to Evander Kane, and he was part of the Hockey Diversity Alliance, right, which works alongside the NHL to essentially improve diversity inclusion within the league. And when the NHL responded to everything that happened over the past year and change, they went out, with a message of end racism during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. And end racism was all over, the end boards and everything. And the HDA wasn't supportive of that, right? Because they didn't go out with the Black Lives Matter message. Yes, end racism. So their whole theory, their whole thinking was, well, we have a lot of different, people that we need to, address in this, because there's a large native population in Canada, and most of the NHL team, a huge amount of NHL teams are here. But the whole deal there was that moment was about Black Lives Matter. It was not about addressing every other nuanced, piece of that may have challenges, right? So they weren't supportive of that message. They thought they should have gone out with the Black Lives Matter message, and so do I, right? And players did. There's numerous players that went out and supported that message, whether it was speaking about it or whether it was, wearing Black Lives Matter merchandise, in training and whatnot. But that was a good example of where you're right. People wanted to jump in, but they kind of wanted to, some leagues wanted to dip their toe in the water rather than dive in, right? And then you have the opposite of that is the NBA, right? Where I'd say that more so than most leagues, the NBA is supportive of, players, speaking their minds. They in the bubble, they did go out with the Black Lives Matter messaging on the court.
Yep.
There was a stronger presence for it. I still think they, had their challenges, but I think it was interesting to see the parallel between the two leagues. And I mean, just looking at the makeup of the athletes in both of those leagues, that's what makes it even more concerning, right? Is, the NHL is predominantly white, white players, and for them to not kind of take as strong a stance, I think rub people a little bit the wrong way.
And I thought, interesting that you brought that up, because I thought the interesting kind of juxtaposition was the WNBA versus the NBA, right? Because on the surface, it looked as if the NBA players, who actually, shut down some games in the bubble, was extremely proactive. You compare them to the WNBA. The WNBA might as well have been the most radical, most aggressive, and I was interested to see, as always, it seemed as if the makeup of the WNBA had more of even the white players and non-Black players buy in to say, this is absolutely the right thing to do. And when they did that, they were ousted owners basically in the WNBA. So I really just thought that was super interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, I think what leagues have had to get used to is that these used to be very controlled environments, right?
Absolutely.
Sports leagues, right? So there was a lot of control on the players. There was a lot of control on the, marketing, the messaging. And with the influx, of social media, that obviously changed. But I think we've even, tenfold, taken that even further forward, where, it almost feels like, it's almost like a player revolt in a little bit of a sense, just short of a full revolt. But it's like, no, I am also a human being. And I want to speak my mind. I want to support, causes that I believe in. And you're essentially not going to control me like, may have happened, in the past, where, even the superstars of the day were very buttoned up, right? Like, I mean, the best example of that is Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah.
If you think back to Michael Jordan, superstar, everyone, just, my favorite player growing up, just like a god, to me, but I don't really remember him.
He didn't,
too much about nothing.
Absolutely. He addressed it later in the Last Dance a little bit, but it was really not, it was a different time. Let me ask this, and because I want to ask you a little bit about your career as well and what you're doing now. But let's ask a little bit about this moment in hip hop, because I feel like hip hop was a lot more active back when we had Public Enemy or we had Self-Destruction, Fight the Power, and it's obviously a little bit easier. The current hip hop in regards to addressing social issues, where do you think we are with that?
I mean, I gotta be careful, because, I have a lot of respect, for the culture, but, there's a good example is Ice Cube. So I think we've learned a lot about Ice Cube over the past,
Boy, have we ever.
a couple of years, but that kind of like hurts, right? For an old school, hip hop fan, someone been around the culture for that long. Like I saw Ice Cube as like, the one of the leaders of the, movement, anti, authority, anti, police brutality, anti racism, anti this, and he was one of the leaders. And I think what we learned is just that, a lot of the successful, hip hop artists, are businessmen, right? And if you think about a businessman in a corporate world, and an executive, right? They have multiple people around them, making sure they don't. Can I swear or?
It's family friendly. So,
okay, cool.
But I know exactly what you're getting at.
You can't mess up anything,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Especially that bag.
You know what I mean? So, I think we put too much in modern day. I think we put too much expectation on, the successful artists of today, because it's just a different environment, right? When Public Enemy were, coming up in NWA and, KRS-One and, we as a hip hop culture, we were trying to address things. We were trying to make our voices heard. And when hip hop became pop music, our voices were kind of like, our voices are being heard, maybe not with the same messages, of the past day, and not as important messaging. But the whole idea back then was we want to be heard, right? And then I think once we were heard, everyone was kind of like, okay, cool, let's just make, cool, let's just make cool music. I'm not saying everybody did that. But, I think back to like tracks like, two of my favorite, hip hop songs of all time, I can't get enough of them, is like, Oh Yeah, and Free Mumia by KRS and Free Mumia with Channel. And like, oh man, like if you listen to those, like they're like this is what some hip hop used to be like. They're like frightening, right? Like like if people heard those, you'd be like, oh damn, like this dude is like militant, like he's trying to say something. And I don't know about you, but I don't hear a lot of, like, I talked to I'm working on a new article, and I talked to Stickman of Dead Prez.
Oh wow!
The other day. Cool dude, like really cool dude, one of my favorites. And I was talking to him about, Be Healthy. So this is a different example, right? But Be Healthy from the Let's Get Free album, right? Such a dope song. Like it's like a head nod, you can feel it, but it's about eating healthy, right? And it was just like the way these dudes delivered it. I was like, the way they delivered it, you were like, damn, I better start eating healthy, like, because they were just so like aggressive with it, right? And that's what like I find that we miss today, is like there's not a lot of that. I love when hip hop used to scare people. Like nothing made me happier when I would play hip hop in my room and my parents would get mad at me, right? And I would just turn it up louder, right? Because like it was like, that's what I loved. That's what drew me to hip hop in the beginning, right? It was like, it was anti-authority. It was unique in the sense that not everybody listened to it. It was like kind of frightening. It was kind of scary. And it was just, that's what was exciting about it, right? And there's not a lot of, modern day hip hop. There's very little modern day hip hop that I would call scary or frightening.
You know what? I've never heard anybody present it the way that you just did, Adam. And the interesting is, there was a moment right when you were speaking, I was like, you're right. Even the stuff that I think is closest to the streets, you mentioned Griselda, or closest to the community.
It's not hip hop, right?
It's not scary.
Right.
It doesn't scare me. It probably wouldn't even be something where, as a parent now, I would go into my, I don't have a 13-year-old, he's younger, but if I had a 14-year-old and they're listening to it, I would probably not do what my parents did when they were, when an NWA album came out. So it's that's interesting. I've never thought of it that way, but you're right. There is nothing that is a shock to the system. Maybe like even a different level of shock. But is there something that's even like when Eminem dropped?
Well, that's another, really interesting. I love like tweeting and like talking about M, because I used to be, one of the bigger Eminem fans, and I don't want to get into a whole sidetrack conversation right now, but
I love it. Let's go with it.
Well, I just find it very difficult to listen to like old Eminem music now, right? Stuff I love, doesn't hit the same way, because man, that was music. That was music for a time. Like I don't consider a lot. Great. It did not age well, right? Which is wild, because like if you think about M at his peak, man, like that was just like, it was shocking, right? Like it was
right. No, it was a thing where your parents literally were like, yo, what is this? There's only a handful of times, like you said, that we remember that it was like, oh, this is some different scary type stuff. And it wasn't scary in the sense of NWA being scary, but it was scary in the sense that it made people uncomfortable.
But I think that's the key point, right? Is NWA, the message in NWA's music still resonates today, right? That was but whereas like, M's was shocking for the fact that he was talking about, killing his, baby mom, and he was talking about, all sorts of crazy stuff about,
shock value.
It was shock value, right? But you're right, just as a kind of isolated example, not even that, right? I mean, you don't even have that there. Well, I mean, shock value is hard today, regardless. Music, you're right.
It's just such, because we're exposed to so much now. Social media,
been,
it's like,
like in a pandemic for 2+ years. I mean, you can't get too much more shocking than
I will say this, and I didn't think about it until you mentioned him. But me and my wife and my son, it was just a radio version. It was a radio version of Stan that came on over the weekend. And I hadn't heard the song in a long time. And I just remember after the song was over, because we, me and my wife, we were hip hop fans, we know the words, but we just stopped and was like, that was a really good song. Like that's just a really good song. Like the way they put it together, messaging wise and so forth. And the interesting is, I follow hip hop quite a bit, and I love a lot of the music. I love Wale and the Coles and the Kendricks, and I love that stuff. And oftentimes I don't double back and say, you know what, God, that was a really good song. Like just the whole thing. So you're exactly right. And it's really, it's interesting. Again, like I said, I've never heard anyone ask about that factor, that kind of scary factor, if you will.
Man. And it's like go listen to Free Mumia. Oh man. Like, play that for like a 60-year-old, white hip hop fan, and tell me that dude's not a little shook.
And you mentioned you mentioned Dead Prez, and the interesting about Dead Prez is Dead Prez was just, they were actually literally they were actually ahead of their time. The world has caught up with Dead Prez.
Yes.
And at the time when Dead Prez came out, people were like, I don't even know. They had a big sticker over the album cover because you couldn't even have that. And it was like, you listen to it. And I remember as a younger black male, I'm like, I don't know. Because you're always thinking like, if the shoes were reversed at the time, you'd be like, I don't know if I feel comfortable. And then you realize, I think like you were talking about, through even what you're talking about with the NHL, the end racism versus Black Lives Matter, it's like, no, wait, the shoes don't have to be reversed. This is what's happened up until this point, and this is the message that they're giving.
Absolutely, man. You think about like a track on there like They Schools, and it's just powerful music, right? And I, like you, I'm sure, when Friday hits, I go check out everything, that dropped. I don't hear a lot of powerful music, right? I mean, there's good music. There's a lot of good music.
The stuff that you hear, you don't get the pub. Like it just doesn't get the pub as well. Like
no. And I used to get like chills when you heard like even like man, you just get like goosebumps like when you'd hear certain tracks back in the day. And it's too bad. I mean, there's a lane there, right? I mean, I think there's a lane for someone to and people have tried. I mean, I'm drawing a little bit of a blank, but there is stuff that's come out, I'm sure independently as well, where some of that, momentum is trying to be brought back. But I mean, the last, I remember like Bam on 444. I mean, that was powerful, but it's Hove again, and Hove can't do everything.
Right.
It's like, how much do we need to do?
It's different though, because again, a Dead Prez today, an X Clan even further back, you don't see those types of, like, the one thing that I always talk about, and I do, I know we're short on time too, but one of the things that was always amazing to me, and I think this is why I do consider him one of the all-time greats, is when we look back on the Eric B. and Rakim, even to the Paid in Full days. It's music that held up. It was music with a message, but you didn't know that it had so much of a message unless you were in that community and understood what 5% knowledge was.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, even to that, I obviously credit him as one of the all-time greats because he gave this medicine in a way that everybody was like, yo, this is just dope music. And Hove, to an extent, has a great knack for doing things like that.
But, oh man, 444 is like, I mean, it's incredible to me, like still, even though it came out 2017, right? That Hove put out a classic album at that age. I mean, 444 is a certified hip hop classic. It's one of my favorite Jay-Z albums, and it came out when the dude was almost 50.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like, I mean, that is incredible, right?
But there's so much game.
Hove comes from that school you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
That Eric B. and Rakim school, and you can see it, right? You got to go in between the lines on 444. You know what I mean? And it's pretty amazing. And you mentioned Eric B. and Rakim. Just one quick note, I worked on I can't say too much about it, but I worked on a pretty incredible podcast that's probably coming out towards the end of next year. And what I would say is it's a hip hop podcast, looking at that kind of era. And it's, hosted by someone pretty incredible that no one is not going to know who it is.
Awesome.
And I got to be a researcher and a scriptwriter on it. And it was incredible to go back really deep, into that era and just really understand like how wild that time was from the impact on culture as a whole, right?
Sure.
The NWAs, the Beastie Boys, even, like
love the Beastie Boys, love them.
And oh man, it was cool. It was cool to dive really, really, deep into that.
Well, let me ask this because we're around the same age, and one of the things that is one of the things I feel like I missed in many ways is I kind of grew up as a fan, a casual fan. And it wasn't till later in life that I just like deep dove into hip hop and hip hop culture and so forth. And then I look back and was like, oh man, all this stuff was happening. And I missed this. On the other hand, Adam, you said first publication in 1996. If I'm doing the math here, you're 16 years old, 17 years old in 16. That sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
I covered Big's death like in real time over on the internet in 1997 with people writing me letters via email, reacting to the news they heard on the radio. And it was pretty wild.
Talk to me about just why you're an average 16-year-old, even if you're a casual fan of hip hop, isn't going and writing stories and launching publications. How did this come about? It's so awesome. I'm so jealous. Yeah. But like, how did your career path start in this way and expand?
My parents always kind of encouraged whatever kind of crazy ideas I had. And like, for me, I realized looking back, I wasn't a casual fan of hip hop. Like that is all I cared about. Staring at the front page of the Source, like just staring, it's hard to explain actually.
Believe me, we understand. We understand. And I think a lot of my listeners are going to understand as well, because they were equally in it.
Yeah. So we just got we got a new computer, and I was like, I want to do something with this. So I started an email newsletter, just went and hunted for emails on message boards and everything. Some of my first subscribers were like KRS-One and a lot of some of the dude used to email me all the time. It was pretty wild. But
how awesome is that? So 16 years old, cool. You're looking at your subscriber list and you're like, oh, that's KRS-One.
Well, what was even crazier was, when I started it and I kind of got some momentum going, 10,000 subscribers pretty quickly. I would go to the record labels and tell them what I was doing. They'd be like, this is on the internet? Nah, we're not messing with that. And then the only dude the only two people that really supported me in the beginning. One is named Saul Guy, who used to run a record label called Figure Four, and then he worked at BMG Music Canada. He supported me right off the go. And the other person, believe it or not, is Mr. Morgan, who's the president of OVO Sound. And he used to run Figure Four as well. And those are two of the first people that kind of supported, what I was doing back then. It didn't laugh me out of the room. There's a lot of other people too, like shout out to Mastermind, John Ramos, a lot of these dudes, local Canada, actually was one of the bigger supporting.
Had your back.
Had my back in the beginning. And then it just kind of blew up for there, went out to 100,000 people a month eventually. And then I actually moved on, launched another .com, went to work with TI for a while on a .com that he had. And then did a whole bunch of other stuff, kind of in between. But for me, I think the takeaway there is just like, I was never like that all I cared about was hip hop. And that is kind of all, more or less it's all I still kind of, care about, although, I've definitely expanded.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Areas, but I have a deep love and appreciation for, hip hop and hip hop culture and the things that it's taught me. It's taught me about business. It's taught me about, relationships. It's taught me about, race relations. It's taught me about, family. It's, taught me about a lot of things, and along with obviously, parents and everything. But I've gotten a lot, from hip hop, but I like to think I'm giving back, a lot too.
So, and I'll get you out on this. That's amazing. That's amazing. And we're going to have you back on, Adam. Look, get used to doing these types of things, because we can do this all day.
I feel you.
In the sense of, I'm always impressed. It seems like every story, every byline with your name on every story you write down is something that is just at the perfect kind of intersection of this awesomeness. And so I'm interested, because how do you even go about selecting the stuff that you want to write about? Because they're all just these fascinating intersections of hip hop, sports, culture, race. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just the perfect kind of combination of things that I love to see. And it seems like you never miss. So I'm interested in how you select your bylines. No. And then, and also, because you have a history of, launching publications, going to do other things, is that something that's always in the back of your mind to say like, oh, I'm going to take another stab at launching a publication or digital or whatever you can do in 2022, 23. So two things, and I'll get you out on that, but how do you select your stories, and then what's the future look like?
Yeah, so selecting stories, I mean, as far as coming up with pitches and everything, I mean, I just look for those corners of anything that people haven't touched, right? So, I try to look for really unique, kind of maybe times crazy angles, to things. And usually I regret pitching them when people accept them, because then I got to write it.
Sure, yeah.
but then no, I just like going into those corners, that are kind of like unexplored. That's kind of how I would answer that. And then the second piece is, I assure you, I will never create another blog. I mean, I promise I will never do that.
Or publication. Like, I mean, it's
also that. No.
Why not?
No, man, I've done that, man. I mean, I appreciate everyone. I appreciate shout outs to people like Nav at Hip Hop and More. I mean, I know the work that goes into that. I mean, It is incredible amount of work. However, and I don't want to get too far ahead of it, but one thing I haven't done is write a book. I am kind of having some early discussions about that. It would be that similar intersection kind of, but I'm kind of maybe getting a little bit excited about doing something like that. So kind of talking about that right now.
That'd be awesome. And then you mentioned the podcasting and things that'll be coming out in the future. What should we look out for in the immediate future, maybe in the next 6 months or so, with your name on it?
Yeah, so I'm working on another story on the NHL for the Undefeated. Working on something around sort of hip hop and health for OK Player, which should be interesting. And then, I mean, I think it depends on what happens with some of these other projects. I might go into a cocoon again for several months, depending on how intense some of these other things are. But I'm sure I'll be around doing some doing some things here over the coming months.
Well, the work is amazing. I'm so
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
glad that I ran across that first article, and it put me down a rabbit hole of all of the articles that I saw on brokencool.com and all the other places where you see your work. Really quick, let people know where they can follow you.
Yeah, I mean, at Broken Cool, IG, Twitter, brokencool.com to kind of see most of the recent work that I completed. And thanks to you, I really appreciate the time and for easing me into my next on-camera phase
it's gonna
of
be
my career
much more, I'm sure. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Adam Aziz. It's Broke and Cool. This is the Cheats Movement podcast on the Family Podcast Network. We'll be right back after this.